So the Great Crusade is basically the Emperor's grand road trip across the galaxy to reunite humanity under one banner, under one Imperium ruled by him after the Age of Strife, well, after the Unification Wars, where he first secured Terra and then went on to Luna and then got the Mechanicum of Mars into the fray with a political alliance. So with his grand fleet and genetically engineered space marine warriors, he went on forth to the galaxy to secure human worlds, to eliminate alien threats and rogue human empires, that is the Great Crusade. Eventually, after a huge victory against the Orks of Ullanor, the Emperor would decide to step back and leave Horus in charge as the Warmaster, while he went back to Terra for a mysterious project, the Webway project. But as the Crusade neared its end, things started falling apart. The Space Marines were stretched thin, the Primarchs were feuding, and the Emperor's decision to have bureaucrats, not Astartes, to govern the Imperium created resentment. However, here in this video we will, with the best of our knowledge, showcase the hierarchy of power or the line of succession within the Imperium right before the Heresy happened. In essence, this will be about who holds the power over another in authority within the nascent empire of humanity in the end of 30K. Let's take a look. So at the top, obviously we have the Emperor, who was the absolute and undisputed sovereign of the Imperium, the architect of the Great Crusade and the master of all mankind. His word was law. His will was reality, and his vision was the guiding principle of the Imperium's expansion. Every action taken by the Imperium, from military campaigns to bureaucratic administration, ultimately stemmed from his divine intellect. Though he delegated authority, none could really question his supremacy. So next was Malcador. He was second only to the Emperor in matters of governance. As the Emperor's most trusted confidant, he was the only model to share in the grand vision of the Imperium's future. He oversaw the administration of the Imperium, the formation of its institutions, and the intricate mechanisms of its rule. As the first Lord of Terra, he wielded supreme authority over all other imperial bureaucracies and proto-administrative bodies. His influence extended over the formation of the Council of Terra, the development of the Imperial Inquisition, and even authority over the Space Marine Legions. Then we also have Constantine Valdor, who was the Emperor's bodyguard, enforcer, and one of his earliest companions. As the leader of the Custodian Guard, Valdor was entrusted with the personal safety of the Emperor himself. However, his role extended beyond simple protection. He was an advisor and a war leader, one of the few beings who could claim true insight into the Emperor's grand plan. His authority was such that even the Primarchs deferred to him in certain matters. Then next we have Dawn, surprisingly, as he was named the Praetorian of Terra, and hence the Emperor's most trusted Primarch when it came to matters of defense and strategy, trusted to protect homeworld. During the Horus Heresy, Dawn's responsibilities expanded further when he was named Lord Commander of the Imperium, effectively becoming the highest-ranking military leader of the Loyalist forces in the Emperor's absence. His word became law in the prosecution of war, and his command structure shaped the defensive efforts of the Imperium. While he did not command the Crusade as Warmaster, he is in charge of the capital of the entire galaxy. A real-world example would be the case of ancient Rome, where Pompey, although a consul like Julius Caesar, was however higher in rank because he was placed in Rome, the capital, while Caesar was outside leading the armies of the Republic in expeditions. Okay, so next in line is obviously the Warmaster, Horus Lupercal, who commanded the latter stages of the Great Crusade and thus commanded authority over all other Primarchs, well, except for Dawn. One might think that the Warmaster is above a Praetorian, but if you think about it, Horus was placed to complete an already almost finished crusade, while the Emperor went over to work on the Webway project. But the security of Holy Terra was placed on Dawn as the Praetorian, and especially so, it was successful since the planet survived the Warmaster's assault in the Siege of Terra at the end of the Horus Heresy. Then anyway, next in line is Ferrus Manus. He was a commander of one of the three Great Crusade main forces, which consisted of multiple expeditionary fleets. So the other two were led by Horus and the Emperor himself. In many instances, other legions like those of Fulgrim had to fall in line under the command of Ferrus Manus. This authority that he held over his brothers was also evident in the Retribution fleet sent to Iswan V to attack the rebelling legions. Ferrus was leading the force that consisted of the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, his own legion, and one could also say he was placed in command over the other reinforcing legions that sadly turned traitor. Even Horus at one point in time proclaimed that Ferrus Manus was perhaps the only other Primarch that surpassed him in knowledge of warfare. So after the Praetorian of Terra and the Warmaster of the Great Crusade, we have unofficial rankings. Let's begin with Sanguinius, who was arguably the most beloved of all the Primarchs, both by his brothers and the Emperor himself. If Horus hadn't been chosen as Warmaster, many believe Sanguinius, or Ferrus Manus, would have been the next logical choice. A sentiment reinforced when Guilliman and the Lion crowned him as ruler of the Imperium Secundus during the Horus Heresy. His nobility, charisma, and ability to inspire absolute loyalty made him an ideal candidate to unite the Imperium. So next in line is, of course, Guilliman, who, on the other hand, was a consummate statesman. As the Primarch of the largest legion, the Ultramarines, he was the architect of the realm of Ultramar, and the one who ultimately stabilized the Imperium after the Heresy. He proved that he both had the mind and the skill to rule an interstellar empire. During the period of the Imperium Secundus, he was the kingmaker and had the balls to even exile the Lion from his realm. Even Dawn, who was originally named Lord Commander of the Imperium, later ceded this title to Guilliman, which is an acknowledgement that in the absence of others, Guilliman was the only other guy that they could turn to in order to repair a hugely damaged empire. Next after Guilliman, we would have the Lionel Johnson, the Emperor's firstborn, the Primarch of the Dark Angels. He was trusted with some of the Imperium's most dangerous secrets and had direct access to weapons of the Dark Age of technology. Despite being secretive and aloof, he was still amongst the Emperor's most trusted sons, even given authority to annihilate the Mechanicum should they ever rebel. The Lion back then was bashful and prone to outbursts of anger and rage, but in a controlled manner, of course, not like Angron. However, the Lion that emerged after 10,000 years of sleep is a whole different man altogether. So subjectively speaking, next in line would obviously be Vulcan, who was unique amongst his brothers. Not only was he one of the most compassionate and humane Primarchs, but he was also one of the very few who spent extended time with the Emperor before being reunited with his legion. Some speculate that the Emperor envisioned a successor in his own image, and Vulcan may have been the perfect choice. He was there in the Siege of Terra and was entrusted with the total annihilation of the planet if it was to ever fall to chaos. This was of course the protocol of the Talisman of Seven Hammers. We can also say that Leman Russ of the Space Wolves would be high in this ranking, and though often seen as the Emperor's executioner, his lapdog, he was also one of the most trusted and entrusted with missions of extreme importance, most notably the censure of Magnus the Red, and according to some rumors, the elimination of at least one of the two Primarchs, the Lost Ones. While he may not have been suited for political rule, his absolute loyalty made him one of the most trusted enforcers of the Emperor's will, and if anything happens, he would have been next in line in this line of succession. So while some Primarchs were clearly positioned as potential rulers of the Imperium, others occupied a more ambiguous space in this hierarchy. Although they are exceptional in their own right, they lack the influence or the trust or even the temperament to be considered for supreme leadership in the worst case scenarios. These mid-tier Primarchs were still highly respected and played critical roles in the Great Crusade, but they either lacked the Emperor's full favor or were overshadowed by their more politically inclined brothers or had personal flaws that kept them from rising higher. Perturabo was a master of siegecraft and logistics, a pragmatic and calculating commander who excelled at warfare on a grand scale. Even though he grew resentful of his role, being constantly tasked with grinding, thankless campaigns, he was still a beast. During the Siege of Terra, it was Perturabo who was at the helm with leading the Traitor Legion's siege operations in the Siege of Terra, proving that he was recognized as one of the most capable amongst his traitor brethren. His ability to even keep Angron and Fulgrim in line during the war speaks volumes of the respect or at least fear he commanded from his brothers. So Fulgrim, on the other hand, was one of the most effective yet also one of the most prideful of the Emperor's sons. His arrogance and unyielding pursuit of perfection made him both brilliant and insufferable at times. He was a gifted warrior, an artist, and a leader who could inspire his warriors to seemingly impossible feats. However, his narcissism and obsession with perfection and excellence meant that he lacked conviction to rule over an imperium. Then Mortarion, despite being a capable general, always had a troubled relationship with the Imperium. His disdain for the Emperor's rule, his grim and melancholic nature, and his deep-seated hatred for Psyker set him apart from many others. While he was respected for his ruthless efficiency in warfare, he was never really a unifying figure. We also have Jagathai Khan, who was a wildcard, and while he was respected as a tactical genius and a commander of the White Scars, his independent and free-willed spirit nature made him difficult to control. Corvus Corax, much like Khan, was an outsider amongst his brothers, a master of stealth warfare and insurgency. He was one of the most dedicated to the Emperor's vision, believing in the liberation and empowerment of humanity. However, his preference for covert operations, tactics and sabotage meant that he was never viewed as a large-scale war leader, nor a ruler. Now we come to the ones which, objectively speaking, would never ever be considered to rule an imperium. First was Conrad Curse. He was simply too cruel and sadistic, even feared by his own brothers, and had no real allies. His brutal and nihilistic approach to justice made him an outcast. Angron was even worse in some ways, as his sheer rage and psychological instability made him nearly impossible to control. While Curse at least had a twisted sense of justice, Angron was a berserker who despised the Imperium itself. Then Magnus the Red, despite his brilliance, was ultimately the greatest liability amongst the Primarchs. The Council of Nicaea proved that the Emperor didn't really fully trust him. So Alpharis and Omegon were also the ultimate enigmas, too secretive, too deceptive and too unpredictable for the Emperor to ever entrust them with supreme authority. And finally we have Lorgar, who despite his deep devotion was fundamentally at odds with the Imperium's guiding philosophy, the Imperial Truth. His censure for worshipping the Emperor was proof that he was never really meant to lead, or he was just there out of mercy. But Primarchs were they nonetheless, and outside of the Primarchs were only mortal men who were never really meant to rule or lead an Imperium. These mortal men, some of them, have esteemed positions of authority, and none more exemplify this than the members of the Council of Terra, which was formed at the end of the Great Crusade for ruling an Imperium when the Primarchs are not really needed anymore. At the top of the Council's power structure were its high-tier members, individuals whose influence directly shaped the Imperium's military might and its industrial strength, and aside from Malcador and Constantine Valdor, none would rank higher than Kelbor Hal, the fabricated general of Mars, who was arguably the most powerful amongst them. Simeon Pentasian, the master of the Administratum, would also rank very high on this list, ensuring that the Imperium's vast logistical machine functioned efficiently and would supply the entire Great Crusade. So below Simeon Pentasian would be Tabor and Haldane. These are the Lord Commander militants of the Imperial Army. They were responsible for the Imperium's massive ground forces and fleets, and thus gives them direct authority over the armies that conquered countless worlds during the Great Crusade. So just as how the Imperial Guard in 40K is essentially under the Munitorum, so was the Imperial Army under the Administratum. Then below the Lord Commander militants would be Har-Rantil, the Grand Provost Marshal of the Adeptus Arbites, who oversaw law enforcement across the Imperium and ensured that the planetary governors and Imperial officials remained loyal and that the Imperial rule was upheld through strict enforcement of order. Then in this line of succession we would have the lower tier members of the Council, who had significant influence but generally lacked the direct military or industrial control that the higher tier members possessed. Koran Ursula, the master of the Astronomicon, ensured that the psychic beacon necessary for warp travel remained operational, but had no other objective other than that. The Paternova of the Navis nobility held the powerful navigator houses in control, and they controlled warp travel, yet their influence were more economic and political rather than militaristic. Ossian, the Chancellor of the Estate Imperium, and Jem Marison, the High Lord of the Imperial Chancellery, were important bureaucrats who handled the Imperium's wealth and governance, but they were administrators rather than rulers. Then Kelsey Demidov, the Speaker of the Charter's Captains, represented the vast networks of the merchant fleets that handled imperial trade, an economic role that is crucial but one that lacked direct control or authority. Lastly, Siddharth Yassin Tharcha, the Chirurgeon General, oversaw the Imperium's medical infrastructure, essential but not the source of political dominance. And so from top to bottom, these are the high-ranking members of the Imperium during the Great Crusade era, at the end of it, and they are ranked in descending order of authority. So at the top you'd have the Emperor, the top ruler, the top G. Under him you'd have Malcador the Sigillite, and parallel to Malcador you'd have Constantine Valdor. Below them are the Primarchs, starting with Rogel Dawn, the Praetorian of Terra, and parallel to him is the Warmaster Horus. Then you would have the higher tier ranking members of the Primarchs, which are Sanguinius, Ferrus Manus, Robuta Gilliman, Lionel Johnson, Lehman Russ, and Vulcan. Then there are the other Primarchs, Then after that you'd have the Council of Terra, which are made of mortal men. And this is the line of succession of the Great Crusade era, at least in my opinion. And so with that we come to the end of this video. And if you want to browse for other sci-fi and Warhammer content, then check out our channel. So subscribe and like for support. Till the next time, take care, boys.